Mutagen changes everything it touches. That is the franchise's founding premise and its most reliable narrative engine. Pour ooze on a turtle and you get a ninja. Pour it on a rat and you get a sensei. Pour it on a warthog and you get a henchman who cannot tie his own shoes but can punch through a brick wall. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise has produced more mutants than any property outside of the X-Men, and each one is a different answer to the same question. What happens when you change what something is? Here is every major mutant in the franchise explained. Let's break this down. The 4 turtles. They are the accident that started everything. 4 baby red-eared slider turtles purchased from a pet store and being carried home by a boy whose name has never been revealed in any continuity were dropped into a storm drain after a traffic accident involving a truck carrying a canister of mutagenic ooze. The canister broke. The ooze covered the turtles, and biology did something that biology was never supposed to do. The turtles grew. They developed humanoid proportions. They developed intelligence, language, personality, and the capacity for martial arts training that would eventually make them the most effective, street-level fighting force in New York City. The mutation is never fully explained in any continuity because the mutation is not the point. The point is what comes after. Leonardo becomes the leader, Raphael becomes the fighter, Donatello becomes the inventor, Michelangelo becomes the heart. 4 identical animals become 4 distinct people, and the franchise's most profound statement about identity is embedded in its origin. The turtles did not choose who they became. The ooze gave them bodies, Splinter gave them names, training gave them skills. And personality, the thing that makes Leonardo different from Raphael, despite sharing identical DNA and identical exposure to identical mutagen, came from nowhere the franchise has ever been able to explain. The 4 turtles are the franchise's most important mutants because they are proof that mutation is not destiny. What the ooze makes you is not who you become. Splinter. He was either a rat who learned ninjutsu from watching a human, or a human who was transformed into a rat by the same ooze that changed the turtles. The answer depends on which continuity you follow, and both answers produce the same character. In the original Mirage comics, Splinter is the pet rat of Hamato Yoshi, a ninja master who was murdered by Oroku Saki. Splinter observed Yoshi's training from his cage, mimicking the movements with his tiny paws, and when the mutagen changed him, the skills he had been rehearsing for years became functional inside a body that could finally use them. In the 1987 cartoon and several subsequent adaptations, Splinter is Hamato Yoshi himself, a human who was mutated into a rat by contact with the ooze, retaining his human memories, his human skills, and his human grief inside an animal body that the world regards as vermin. Both origins produce the same father, the same sensei, and the same moral center. Splinter teaches the turtles ninjutsu, not because he wants warriors, but because he knows the world will not accept them, and the only way to protect his sons from a planet that fears what they are is to make them capable of protecting themselves. Splinter's mutation is the franchise's most tragic because it gave him everything and took everything. He gained a body that could fight. He lost a body that could walk through the world without being hunted. If you are enjoying this so far, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with the TMNT mutant you think has the best origin. Let us get back into it. Bebop and Rocksteady. They were human before the ooze, and the ooze made them less. Bebop and Rocksteady begin as street thugs in the 1987 animated series low-level Purple Dragons members who are humiliated by the turtles and subsequently volunteer for Shredder's mutation experiments because being mutated by a villain sounds better than being beaten by turtles again. Bebop is exposed to warthog DNA. Rocksteady is exposed to rhinoceros DNA. The transformations give them superhuman strength, enhanced durability, and a combined intelligence that would struggle to operate a doorknob. Their mutation is the franchise's most ironic because it gave them power and took their competence. They are physically capable of destroying the turtles. They are mentally incapable of formulating a plan that would get them within swinging distance. Every encounter follows the same pattern Shredder sends them. They arrive loud, they break things, the turtles outmaneuver them. Shredder screams. The IDW comics reimagine them as genuinely dangerous, giving their mutations a darker edge and their combat capability a lethality that the cartoon version never possessed. The 2014 and 2016 films made them chaotic agents of destruction whose enthusiasm for violence was played for comedy without diminishing their threat. But the core dynamic has never changed across any adaptation. Bebop and Rocksteady are the franchise's proof that mutation without intelligence is muscle without direction, and muscle without direction is comedy. Leatherhead. His mutation is the one the franchise cannot decide on, and every decision produces a different character. Leatherhead is a mutant American alligator whose origin, personality, and allegiance shift so dramatically between adaptations that the character functions as a mirror reflecting whatever the current version of the franchise needs him to be. In the Mirage comics, Leatherhead is mutated by TCRI's Utrum aliens, gaining intelligence and size in captivity before escaping into the sewers. He is an ally of the Turtles, articulate and thoughtful, a gentle giant whose size masks a sophisticated mind. In the 1987 cartoon, Leatherhead is a Cajun-accented swamp villain, territorial and aggressive, a gator who fights the Turtles because they entered his domain without permission. In the 2003 series, Leatherhead is a tragic figure mutated by the Utrums and later tortured by the Krang, whose PTSD manifests as berserker episodes that transform him from a gentle companion into an uncontrollable force. The 2012 series deepened this further, making his crawling captivity the defining trauma of his existence. And Mutant Mayhem reimagined Leatherhead as female, voiced by Rose Byrne with an Australian accent, stripping away the character's traditional menace and replacing it with a sardonic warmth. Leatherhead is the franchise's most adaptable mutant because the alligator can be anything. Hero, villain, tragic figure, comic relief. The species is neutral, the mutation is neutral, and the character becomes whatever the story pours into it. Slash. He is the dark mirror. Every franchise needs one. The version of the hero that shows what the hero could become if something went wrong. And Slash is the Turtles' most enduring reflection of that possibility. Slash is a mutant snapping turtle, larger, stronger, and more aggressive than any of the four brothers. And his existence across adaptations asks the same question every time. What if a turtle was mutated without Splinter? In the 1987 cartoon, Slash was Bebop's pet turtle, mutated by Rocksteady into a hulking, barely intelligent monster whose violent tendencies made him uncontrollable. In the Archie Comics continuity, Slash's homeworld was destroyed, leaving him a traumatized survivor whose aggression was driven by loss rather than stupidity. In the 2012 series, Slash was Raphael's pet turtle Spike, mutated by accident into a sentient warrior who idolized Raphael's fighting style and carried it to extremes that even Raphael found excessive. He later became the leader of the Mighty Mutanimals and sacrificed himself to save the Turtles, completing an arc from dark mirror to genuine hero. In the IDW comics, Slash is a mutant alligator, snapping turtle, and a member of Old Hob's Mutanimals, a character whose violence is tempered by loyalty and whose eventual sacrifice mirrors his 2012 counterpart. Slash is the franchise's most honest mutant because he shows what the Turtles' mutation produces without the Turtles' upbringing. Same ooze, same species, no Splinter. And without Splinter, the turtle becomes a weapon rather than a warrior. Toka and Rahzar. They exist because Bebop and Rocksteady could not appear in the second film, and their existence has been haunted by that production reality ever since. Toka is a mutant snapping turtle, Rahzar is a mutant wolf. Both were created by Shredder in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 2, The Secret of the Ooze, using the same mutagen that created the Turtles, and both were deliberately mutated with reduced intelligence because the Shredder learned from the Turtles' example that intelligent mutants are difficult to control. Toka and Rahzar are weapons, not soldiers. They fight with the destructive enthusiasm of toddlers, smashing through walls and swinging at anything that moves without understanding what they are hitting or why. The franchise has revisited them across multiple adaptations. The 2012 series reimagined Rahzar as the mutated form of Chris Bradford, Shredder's top human enforcer, whose transformation into a skeletal wolf creature was depicted as body horror that the previous cartoon versions never attempted. Toka and Rahzar are the franchise's most explicitly manufactured mutants, creatures who were designed to be weapons by a villain who understood that the best weapon is one that cannot question its orders. Baxter Stockman as the Fly. The transformation is the franchise's most Kafkaesque moment, and it has been depicted differently enough across adaptations that the character is effectively three different people sharing the same name. In the 1987 cartoon, Baxter Stockman is a human scientist who is accidentally fused with a housefly during a teleportation experiment involving Krang's technology, emerging from the process as a buzzing, twitching, insectoid hybrid whose intelligence survives the transformation, but whose sanity does not. The Fly Baxter is one of the 1987 series' most visually distinctive villains, a creature whose compound eyes, transparent wings, and prehensile proboscis make him simultaneously disgusting and pitiable. He wants to be human again. He cannot be. And his descent from brilliant scientist to buzzing mutant is played with enough pathos that the audience feels sympathy for a character who was a straightforward villain before the transformation. The 2003 series took a different approach entirely, never mutating Stockman into a fly, but instead dismantling him physically, removing body parts one at a time as punishment for failures, until he is reduced to an eyeball on a robotic spider, a version of the character that is more disturbing than any insect transformation because the degradation is deliberate and inflicted by an employer rather than accidental. The 2012 series combined both approaches, mutating Stockman into a fly. Some flies saw whose buzzing deterioration mirrors his mental unraveling. The Punk Frogs. They are the Turtles' counterparts, and the franchise has never quite decided what to do with them. The Punk Frogs are a group of mutant frogs created accidentally in the 1987 cartoon when Shredder's mutagen spills into a Florida swamp and transforms 4 ordinary frogs into humanoid amphibians. Shredder names them after historical conquerors Genghis Frog, Attila the Frog, Rasputin the Mad Frog, and Napoleon Bonafrog, and initially trains them as weapons against the Turtles before the frogs realize they are being manipulated and switch sides. The parallel between the frogs and the Turtles is structural. 4 mutant amphibians with distinct personalities raised by a surrogate authority figure and trained in combat. The frogs are the Turtles seen through a funhouse mirror, same template, different outcome, and their eventual alliance with the Turtles is the franchise's earliest statement that mutation creates community rather than isolation. Napoleon Bonafrog received the most individual development across adaptations, particularly in the 2012 series, where his friendship with Michelangelo and his recurring appearances gave him more screen time than the other 3 frogs combined. Mondo Gecko and the Mighty Mutanimals. The franchise's mutant population eventually grew large enough to support its own team, and the Mighty Mutanimals are the result. Mondo Gecko is a mutant green gecko whose origin varies between adaptations. In the 1987 cartoon, he was a baby gecko mutated by the same ooze that created the Turtles. In the Archie comics, he was a human skateboarder exposed to mutagen. In the 2012 series, he was a teenage skater who mutated after a vial of mutagen fell on his head while his pet gecko was on his shoulder. Across every version, Mondo is Michelangelo's closest mutant friend outside the family, a kindred spirit whose love of fun and skateboarding mirrors Mikey Saw's own personality. The Mighty Mutanimals formed around characters like Mondo, Slash, Leatherhead, Pigeon Pete, and Dr. Rockwell in the 2012 series, and in the IDW comics, the team is assembled by Old Hob as a mutant militia dedicated to protecting mutants from human persecution. The Mutanimals represent the franchise's most important thematic expansion. The Turtles are not the only mutants, they are part of a community, and the community has its own needs, its own politics, and its own fights that exist independently of the Turtles' war against the Shredder. Tiger Claw, Fish Face, and Dog Pound. The 2012 Nickelodeon series introduced more original mutant villains than any previous adaptation, and 3 of them became recurring threats whose presence defined the Shredder's inner circle for the show's 5-season run. Tiger Claw is a mutant Bengal tiger, an assassin from Japan whose origin involves kidnapping by the Krang alongside his sister Alopex, mutation through Krang experimentation, and a career as a mercenary that brought him to New York as Shredder's most dangerous enforcer. Fishface is the mutated form of Xavier Montes, a Brazilian street criminal whose exposure to mutagen combined him with a koi fish, giving him aquatic capabilities and a personality that is simultaneously vain, sarcastic, and genuinely lethal. Dogpounded is the mutated form of Chris Bradford, Shredder's top human student, whose initial mutation into a giant Akita-like creature was later compounded by a second exposure that transformed him into the skeletal Rahzar. The 2012 series' willingness to mutate its human villains rather than introducing pre-existing mutant characters creates a horror dynamic that previous adaptations avoided. These are people who became monsters, and the transformation is depicted with a visceral discomfort that makes each mutation feel like a violation rather than an upgrade. Alopex and Old Hob. The IDW comics created the franchise's most politically complex mutants, and their conflict defines the modern TMNT's most ambitious narrative thread. Alopex is a mutant Arctic fox, originally a wild animal in Alaska, who was mutated by the Foot Clan and trained as an assassin before breaking free and becoming an ally of the Turtles. Her arc across the IDW run is a redemption story that places her alongside Raphael both romantically and ideologically, a warrior whose history of violence under the Shredder's control mirrors Raphael's own struggle with aggression. Old Hob is a mutant alley cat, the first creature mutated by the same ooze that created the IDW Turtles. He lost an eye to Splinter during his mutation, and the grudge that loss created has fueled a decades-long antagonism that evolved from personal vendetta into political ideology. Hob founded the Mutanimals not as a hero team, but as a mutant supremacist organization, arming mutants, acquiring territory, and advocating for mutant independence from human society through methods that range from activism to terrorism depending on the issue. Old Hob is the franchise's most morally gray mutant because his grievances are legitimate, his methods are extreme, and his vision of a mutant homeland is simultaneously the franchisee's most utopian and most dangerous political idea. Jennica. She is the fifth turtle, and she earned the shell the hardest way any turtle ever has. Jennica was introduced in IDW's TMNT comics as a human, a former Foot Clan member who defected and joined the Hamato family after years of serving Shredder. Her martial arts skills are foot-trained, her personality is tough and compassionate in equal measure, and her loyalty to the Turtles was established long before her mutation made it biological. When Jennica is stabbed by Karai and left dying, Leonardo saves her life by transfusing his own mutant blood into her body. The transfusion transforms her into a turtle, giving her the shell, the green skin, and the enhanced physical capabilities of the four brothers while retaining her human memories, her Foot Clan training, and her identity as a person who chose this family rather than being born into it. Jennica wears a yellow bandana, a color no other turtle has claimed, and her weapon of choice is a pair of metal claws that visually echo the Shredder's gauntlets, a design connection that links her permanent identity to the enemy she once served. Jennica is the franchise's most important modern mutant because she proves that the turtle family is not defined by biology. It is defined by choice, and Jennica's choice, made while bleeding out on a rooftop, was to stay. Superfly and the Mutant Mayhem Crew. The 2023 film produced the franchise's largest single-movie mutant population and used it to ask a question no previous adaptation had centered: what do mutants owe each other? Superfly is the primary antagonist, a mutant fly created by Baxter Stockman alongside a dozen other mutant animals including Bebop, Rocksteady, Leatherhead, Mondo Gecko, Wingnut, Ray Fillet, Genghis Frog, and Scumbug. When Stockman's laboratory was destroyed, Superfly led his mutant family into hiding, raising them in the shadows of New York City, while the human world above hunted anything that looked different. His villainy is not ambition. It is protection curdled into genocide. Superfly has watched humans persecute mutants for his entire life. And his solution, a retro mutagen device that would transform every human on Earth into a mutant animal, is monstrous in method but coherent in motivation. The Mutant Mayhem Crew is the franchise's most sympathetic villain roster because every mutant on Superfly's side has a reason to hate humans, and the Turtles' opposition to Superfly's plan is not based on disagreement with his grievance, but on disagreement with his solution. The Turtles know humans can accept mutants because the Turtles have experienced acceptance from April. Superfly has experienced nothing but rejection. Same mutation, same world, different evidence, and the gap between those two experiences is wide enough to build an entire film inside. And that is every major mutant the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise has produced across 40 years of comics, cartoons, films, and toy lines. The pattern underneath all of them is the same. Mutagen does not create heroes or villains. It creates potential, and the person or animal that emerges from the ooze becomes whatever the world around them shapes. Splinter had Yoshi's training, so the ooze made a sensei. The Turtles had Splinter's love, so the ooze made warriors with a moral code. Bebop and Rocksteady had Shredder's orders, so the ooze made weapons without judgment. And Superfly had nothing but rejection, so the ooze made a revolutionary. The mutagen is neutral, the world is not. And every mutant on this list is a reflection not of what the ooze did to them, but of what the world did to them after the ooze was done. That is the franchise's deepest insight, buried inside a premise about Ninja Turtles and pizza. You are not what you were born as, you are what happens next.